Yeah, firstly, welcome, morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's a sunny day here in the Midlands. I hope it is for wherever you guys are. Look, as you're all aware, today we're talking all things iOS 14. It kind of feels like it's been a long wait for iOS 14. It's been spoken around a lot, but I think more than ever this week, it's prevalent. It's very much here, and with it comes a raft of updates that will drastically impact the way we as marketeers or you as brands track campaigns both on Facebook and on Instagram. So I guess today we want to kind of lift the lid on that a little bit and kind of really dig down into what does that impact actually look like? What does it mean for you? How can you prepare for it? What opportunities are there? Off the back of this for brands and for marketeers. And to help us do that today, I'm joined by my two esteemed colleagues, Troy and George, our paid expert and paid media expert and social expert, who are going to help us navigate these changes, these impacts, offer loads of advice, going to be able to answer any questions that you guys might have. As you've all been aware, I guess most people have been on, use Zoom for webinars over the last 12 months. So we're going to be using the Q&A feature. You should be able to see it at the bottom of your screen. If you can't tell us because you can't see the Q&A feature, I apologize, but it should be down there at the bottom. What we might do, probably halfway through, we'll take a little look at maybe addressing some of the questions. If not, we've got some time at the end for a Q&A panel where Troy, George, myself will be able to field any questions. And if anybody has any questions beyond that, my details will be on the end slide. Welcome to take that, get in touch with me, put you in touch with any of the guys. If you have further questions, want to know more about iOS 14, about us, Electric House, then feel free to reach out. Just a little intro in terms of who you've got joining today. So firstly, myself. So I'm your host for today. I'm Phil Hewlett, head of new business here at Electric House. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Really keen to make sure everyone get off at 10:30 at the latest. So going to keep this kind of 45-50 minutes, dependent on if I can pull Troy out of any rabbit holes. You'll notice he is a very passionate paid expert. So that is my ultimate task today. But yeah, as I mentioned before, we're going to be using the Q&A feature. Please get your questions through there. We'll pick those up at the end. You might see that we kind of go a little bit back and forth. There's structures to the webinar, but naturally, as the topics that are talked around, Troy might kind of give you a little bit more than is just on the slides. So if you need any of that kind of repeating or any confirmation, again, use the Q&A. But we'll make sure you get tons of information from this today. A little bit of an intro, just in terms that if anybody hasn't, you're not aware of Electric House, never engaged with us, haven't been to, you're not a client or haven't worked with us, or you've not been to a webinar before. So in short, we're a social media publishing group. We not only create and produce content, but we distribute that content back to communities that we've grown. We have 3 key communities: on the tools, on a budget, ministry of. Can share more detail with you on those if anybody has any questions. We not only offer campaign work work with clients for campaign work where we distribute to the communities, but we also offer social media management and consultancy, which is why iOS 14 is kind of really at the forefront of our minds, because it's not just in terms of our communities and spheres. But later on, George is going to come into kind of what the value you can get from a community, not just ours, but how you can get value. So George will talk through that with you guys. I really thought my son was going to come in then, sorry. And I realized if that was my son, he's suddenly got very tall. There'll be no more intruders, I can promise you. Guys, you want to give a quick intro?
Yeah, I am the paid specialist here at Electric House. I look after all things paid, both internally and for our clients as well. So yeah, that's me, and I'll be talking quite a lot during this webinar.
And I am here to make up the numbers. So thanks, everybody. No, I'm joking entirely. I'm just not the paid specialist. So obviously, as Phil says, I'm going to be talking about the community side, as I am the head of the On a Budget community, but then work very closely with On the Tools team as well. See you the other side of Troy.
Thank you both. So look, in this first section, we're going to, Troy's going to talk you through this. We're going to take in a bit of a deeper dive into areas such as the impact on pixel advertisers. We'll break down what that actually is. What is a pixel advertiser? Troy will give us some insight for anybody that is kind of new to paid or to iOS. And then potentially, if you've got people that have a little bit more of an understanding, Troy can develop on some of the kind of deeper issues, looking at the impact on Facebook ads, and then ultimately, kind of towards the end, we want to be able to share what opportunities look like. So rather than just this is the impact, what are the opportunities? What can you do? What kind of powers do you have to look to make change? So yeah, without any further ado, I'll pass you over to our paid specialist, Troy.
Okay, let's move forward because I don't want to look at myself on that slide. But I might add, for continuity, I wore exactly the same clothes, so or didn't change for a week. I don't know. So yeah, let's get into this. So I was worried at the start that this webinar was going to be kind of outdated because we've heard about iOS 14 for so long, and it seemed like we may have been sort of last to jump on it and inform people. However, Apple yesterday, well, over the last few days, announced that next week it is going ahead and getting sort of started with iOS 14.5, which is the ATT part of iOS 14. That is the app tracking transparency, sexy name for this. Basically, what it is, and let's sort of get into that before we get on to sort of the pixel-based stuff. In a nutshell, it is a pop-up that will appear on your screen when you open an app and you've downloaded this latest version of iOS 14. And it'll basically ask you, will you allow the app to track your data, or do you not want it to track? If you allow it to track, then you kind of won't see any difference. As an advertiser, we'll see a slight difference. And if you don't allow it to track, then there will be changes. So let's sort of get into what these changes might be. This webinar mainly covers, because it seems to be that a lot of you out there, who use Facebook advertising are in the sort of center column here, your pixel reliant advertisers. Let's brush over the other two. So they're SDK advertisers. These are app advertisers, and there are also publishers that use the Facebook audience network as well. But this is about the pixel reliant advertisers, the ones that use Facebook ads for lead gen, e-commerce, that sort of thing, with a conversion basically at the end of it. So that is what this whole thing is going to be about, and how things will change for you. If we go on to the next slide, we can sort of have a look at our journey. So what things look like at the moment if you are an advertiser and you're putting out Facebook ads. So a user sees or clicks an ad, they're taken to a website, and they make the sale or convert the lead. So this brings us on to talking about things like events. So what is a pixel event, and how will this be impacted? So at the moment, currently, you can have unlimited events, and we'll sort of dive a little deeper into that later. But I want to talk about the event sort of stage of things. So you'll have an event. So an event would be if somebody goes onto your site, viewing a page is an event. Opting into something is an event. Adding something to a cart is an event. Purchasing a product is an event. And how Facebook would do this, it would send the signal to your site, event would be triggered, it would send that event trigger back to Facebook, and Facebook would tell you as the advertiser that yes, somebody's made a purchase, yes, somebody is a lead, yes, you've got a conversion. With users that now opt out, only one pixel event will be fired, whereas users, if they opt in, will have, instead of unlimited events, you get to have up to 8 pixel events. So your 8 pixel events could fire. So if you've opted in, we as marketers, or you as marketers, would see a broader customer journey, so a larger user experience on your site and within your advertising. If they've opted out, we'll only see one event. Facebook doesn't just do this randomly. You will get the option within your sort of Facebook iOS 14 to-do list of prioritizing these 8 events. And if I was to sort of go over that, and we will sort of look at this in a little bit more detail later, and maybe Phil will ask some questions about it too. But if you were to look at your 8-pixel events, look at the priority as probably being the bottom of your funnel. So if you're doing e-commerce, the bottom of your funnel is probably the sale. So you'd have that as your key priority event, your sale. Then it could be add to cart as your second one. View product would be a third one. View page might be a fourth one, and so on and so on. But the important thing to remember here is you only get 8. I think if we move on, we can see the sort of like how this really looks. So looking at these pixel reliant advertisers, before iOS 14, we had unlimited pixels. The good thing about that was, or in fact, the interesting thing about that, imagine you are a multinational brand. And I've seen this quite a lot, actually. You'll have an ad account and multiple agencies from around the world. So you might have a Spanish agency, a German agency, Chinese agency, and they'll all be using different pixels to track these conversions for their ad setups. Now, what's going to happen if you are that multinational? You're going to have to get really laser focused in on this, because you can only have 1 pixel per domain, and as we know, you can only have 8 events per pixel. So again, before iOS 14, you had these unlimited standard events. Now we've only got 8. So we've got to be like super focused on what we're going to do with those 8 events. Even subdomains. So like if you've got, I think, and again, this is the interesting thing about this iOS 14. Everybody was panicking at the very start. Everybody's sort of running around and sort of, saying that Facebook ads are going to be dead. Advertisers are going to be useless. Facebook might die as a platform. I mean, come on. It's one of the smartest AIs in the world, and they make so much of their revenue from ads. So like, they're going to find a workaround. It's going to happen. But the problem for us at this point is we know the sort of initial impact. We know what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. The big problem is that when this kicks in next week, so as I said, this is your last call really to get to make these changes. When this kicks in next week, we as advertisers and you as running your Facebook ad accounts aren't really going to know what's going to happen. We're speculating a lot, and people are saying ads are just going to drop off the end of the cliff. That's not going to happen, but certain things will. So, for example, if you rely on the pixel, you rely on the pixel to do other things as well. It's not just events. We're relying on the pixel to build audiences. So we're tracking people going through to our website. We can build a custom audience off that. We can build a lookalike audience off the back of that custom audience. So we can do remarketing campaigns and this sort of stuff. When we see this iOS 14 go live, there's a really good chance that we're going to see, a diminishment in the effectiveness of custom audiences. So that means the pixel sending Facebook back less data for us, less trackable stuff, meaning that our audiences could take a hit. In turn, if your custom audiences, so your web audience takes a hit, all your lookalike audiences will probably take a hit as well, meaning that ads with just custom audiences could either increase in cost because we're hitting less relevant people, or we're just going to hit less. Numbers are going to go down. But the thing is, it's not going to drop off the edge of the cliff. One day it's not going to be everything's running fine, and the next day everything just stops. It's not going to happen like that for custom audiences, but it might leave you to sort of think a little bit more about how you build your ads, and what sort of strategies you use. I think it's important to say this isn't about sort of thinking that everything's over. This is about sort of readjusting, realigning a strategy, going back to the drawing board maybe a little bit, and making some new plans really for your ads. The other thing that is impacted wildly, and this is mainly from, I guess, the reporting side of things, is the conversion window, so the attribution window. So there's a 28-day attribution window traditionally, and what that meant is that, let's look at it from an e-commerce side. So what that meant was, let's say somebody sees your ad and they looking at it and they might go onto your site, but they don't buy right now. They want to do a little bit of due diligence. They want to look into the product. They don't buy it there and then. If you've got the 28-day attribution, you had 28 days to complete that conversion. So the conversion for us would have been maybe a purchase, okay? So if within that 28 days, they complete the purchase, that's a conversion. That comes back to Facebook and says, yep, tick, somebody's converted. Now our attribution window is going to be 7 days. And it's been 7 days as standard now for a little while, as iOS 14 preparations have been made. Facebook's been kind of making this a standard thing for quite a while. But what that means is now from 28 days, we've now gone down to 7 days. So somebody sees your ad, click on it, look at the product, go away, do some due diligence. 8 days later, or 10 days later, or whatever, after the 7 days, they come back on, they buy the product, they complete the purchase. You as an advertiser, if you're using Facebook ads, will not see a conversion for that purchase because we're now in 7 days. So anything over 7 days, no conversion for you. Now, that doesn't mean that for your client, so like if you've got a client and you're running like e-commerce for a client or lead generation or something like that for a client, it doesn't mean the client doesn't get the purchase or they don't get the lead. It just means that you as an advertiser don't see the lead. So like that's really tricky because we've been relying on like Facebook reporting for a while and some people take it as gospel. I don't think I've ever taken it Facebook reporting as gospel because it can swing wildly now and again. But now more than ever with this 7-day conversion, you need to probably do a little bit more. You need to, communicate more with your clients, make them aware of this, make them aware of this 28-day to 7-day change and the impact that it can have. Because for me, pixels, when the iOS 14 gets implemented, we still will see that 1 pixel event. So we'll still be able to track certain things, even from people who have, opted out of the tracking. We'll still be able to see that 1 event because Tim Cook's been so benevolent to Facebook and allowed them to see this 1 tracking event. Thank you, Tim. So, there is that. So we can still see pixel events. We can still create custom audiences, but the big change for me is this 28 days down to 7 days, because if you're reporting to a client, your reports can change and those KPIs can go out the window and it might mean that you don't hit targets. So, I mean, what can we do to sort of try to get around this? If we move on to the next slide, there's a few steps that Facebook have been sort of touting for quite a while now. So if you were in your ads manager and you clicked over to the, I believe it's the left side of the screen, there's a left tab and it would have had some actions for you. And some of these actions were in there. But before I go over these ones, I want to sort of talk about the one that I've just been talking about. So this 28 days down to 7 days. What can we do on like the surface that will help us with our clients and you to track a little better? So maybe when you're building your ads, and this isn't like a solid workaround, this is just something that people are, I think we're all trying to think of what it's going to be like next week. And until it really happens, we're not going to know. So like next Monday and Tuesday for you guys as advertisers, I'm guessing is going to be a really crucial time. You're going to be watching those ads and seeing how they react. If anything, they may not. But the one thing that I would do personally is like if you're running a Facebook ad to get a conversion, a simple thing that you can do right now, and a simple thing that you could have done like for a long time is use like an UTM tracking code within your ads. So that's just something, a little line of code that goes onto the end of your URL. It'll talk to things like Google Analytics and people using that to track. So if your client is using Google Analytics, and I would suggest as well that everybody out here gets comfortable with like using Google Analytics. And if you are using it already, maybe bolt on Google Analytics 4 as well, and have that running side by side. But basically this UTM tracking means that if you've created your ad campaign for a conversion and you've added a UTM tracking code to the end of it, the client or you as a marketer will actually be able to see the real conversions from this campaign. So instead of relying on these the 7-day conversions and reporting back to the client, okay, you had like 50 sales this week. It might have been that the clients had 80 sales that week. And if you use that UTM tracking code, the client on their side, through their Google Analytics, will be able to see, yes, okay, I can see that this campaign caused this conversion, and it just makes it a little bit more transparent for everybody. So that's like a little fix that you could do right now. If you're not using UTM tracking codes, you could use that right now. Phil, you might ask what, because you like abbreviations.
I don't know if I like abbreviations, but I just fear I can't see anybody, and I fear that people are sat there thinking, what is that? Troy, what is that?
Well, I've told you exactly what it is, but I just like saying the name. It's Urchin Tracking Module. Brilliant. But anyways, like you can find your UTM tracking code. If you're in your Facebook ads, you get to ad level, and you know where you put your URL in for the ad. Keep scrolling down, and there'll be options for tracking. So you can build your UTM tracking code there, and you can use that in Google Analytics. And it's a really nice workaround to make sure you get a better report, basically. But the other things that can be done. So Facebook are touting, there are some really important things that you should do. So the first thing is verify that domain. Facebook needs to see that you're the sole owner of the domain. Of course, you verify the domain, go into business manager settings. It's usually adding a line of code into your site, so Facebook can see that your domain's genuine and that you are the owner. Remember, 8 priority events per domain. That leads us on to our priority events there. So again, in Business Manager, go in there, you'll be able to see it's in your aggregated event management section. So if you go into Pixels, then go into Event Manager, look at aggregated event management, and you'll be able to select your 8 events. And it's pretty much a walkthrough. So Facebook will give you different options. It'll guide you through the process, guide you through the steps to creating these 8 events. And then for things like people who have like apps and things like that, apps need their own iOS 14 accounts. So like if you're running day-to-day campaigns for your page, your business, your website, you're going to need another ad account to bolt onto your existing ad account for your app. Okay, because apps have a different tracking method. So it's that SDK tracking, and that's for your apps. So there's sort of 3 things that you should do. But it's important to sort of note that Facebook is saying, and again, we don't know that this is completely true, but it's been said quite a lot. If you don't do this, if you don't verify your domain, there's a good chance that your ads that are running for conversions could just be paused or stopped until you verify this domain. So Facebook isn't just telling you to do these things for the sake of telling you to do them. It's telling you to do them because it believes it's going to be important. And I believe it will stop your ads from performing. It may even pause your ad account. So it's not worth it. You've literally got less than a week to make these changes. So it's worth going into your ads manager now and sort of looking to see what you can do. I think the other things, and George is probably going to come on to this a little bit more when he talks about audiences and how we build things. But we've mentioned UTM. It's important that we mention this third-party data. So you as advertisers, it's time to get really comfortable with things like GDPR and the collection of first-party data, because that can help your ad funnels. It can help your custom audiences and things like that too. That's really important. Also, things like focusing on interests, because we don't know what the impact of these audiences will be. How will this affect our custom audiences? How will this affect our lookalike audiences? It's going to be important for you as advertisers to actually, dive into interests and start creating some interest campaigns and sort of there's going to be a lot of test and learn. And myself, that does this on a day-to-day basis, and you guys out there who are clearly interested because you're advertising on Facebook, you'll hear Facebook advertisers say this a lot. You've got to keep testing and learning, and now more than ever, it's time to test some new interests, test some audience combinations, and just put your testing hat on and go for it next week. Do expect things to drop, because it's likely that's going to happen, but don't panic too much. Facebook's really smart. The AI is super smart, so they will find a workaround. I think that the big take home from this for me is this isn't as bad as people thought. I mean, even there was a survey, I believe a few weeks ago, from a company called AppsFlyer, 13.2 million exposures already to this pop-up. And 41% of those people opted into tracking. So that's really interesting, because they know, and like, if you opt out of tracking, so you don't want to be tracked, it will change your user experience on a platform. Ad relevancy might change for you. I think Phil mentioned this before when we were previously talking, that you will still see ads. Blocking this tracker doesn't mean that Facebook won't serve you ads. It will still serve you the same volume of ads. It will just mean that the ads might be less relevant to you, and your experience on the platform might be less relevant to you. So, I think personally, once this rolls out and people see the impact, a lot of people will opt back in. This isn't irreversible. If you opt out, you can opt back in. You go into your settings and you opt back in. And this isn't just a Facebook thing. So this is like any app, LinkedIn, TikTok, all of those apps that use pixels to track things, they're going to have the same. I think how many times you've logged onto a website, you've wanted to view something and it says, do you allow cookies? And you just click yes, allow, just because I want to get on with it and see the content. This is kind of the same thing. And remember, in the future, we're going to be dealing with a cookieless world. I certainly don't want to jump down that rabbit hole, because that's a conversation for another time.
I think the fact you've said that, and the fact we've just hit 10 a.m. Troy has given me a good segue. And well done, because out of my 7 questions, you've touched on all of them. And I thought you're not going to mention the user experience, and you did. So thank you for that. You've kept me silent. No, that's really useful, and I can't see if we've had any questions come through, and if we have, we can pick them up, like I said, in the Q&A. If there's anything there that you think you'd like Troy to go into a bit more detail on, and like I said, please reach out to us afterwards. But yeah, Troy, really useful, and it does sound naturally there's a lot of information just there alone in what, the best part of 22 minutes, and a lot of acronyms and things for people to consider. But I think the one thing that does stand out is that there are opportunities, and that this probably isn't as impactful as people first thought. And trying to segue nicely here for George, but it is around those opportunities, and especially for our area, when we look at communities, that I think George is able to offer some value, and it goes off what you were just talking around there, very much, Troy. So look, George is going to take us through now what those opportunities might look like, how Facebook communities or communities might just have the upper hand against algorithms and data restrictions, such as iOS 14. So I will pass you over to our very handsome George Smith.
Oh, that's very kind of you, Phil. Worth noting, we potentially could be sat in the same room with our backdrops. We're actually sat side by side.
That's you can't see me now.
There you go. A cookieless world, eh? What a horrifying thought, he says, not really knowing what that means. Continuing on, the last slide was what can be done now, and I think that is like quite a apt lead on to what I'm going to talk about. So just to go back, obviously, I'm the head of On a Budget, the social community at Electric House, but also work with On the Tool, so our social team does work very closely together. So, my interests are all things community at the end of the day. So just echoing what has been discussed so far, obviously the takeaway from this whole thing is about first party data becoming more essential. So the question is, how do we go about obtaining that, and how do we increase the opportunities from that? Now, from a social side, the solution for me is the community. Now, one of two reasons really. First of all, communities can be a great source of this data because of the fact that you can leverage this from your following to perhaps create something of value in return. So just for an example, if you've got a large following on one of your pages, you could create a newsletter in return for some email data. Or another thing that I know that we use in Electric House but can be really useful is surveys. Now, you could be offering something in return for surveys, but then that can be a source of data as well as some really useful insights on your community, which can in turn guide where you're going and what you're doing with your networks. Secondly, because creating this vibrant community on Facebook is keeping users on Facebook, which ultimately is what we want to do. And this is going to be really beneficial when it comes to paid support now, because the more actions users are taking within Facebook, the better the targeting is going to be, post iOS 14, because we want our users to be on the platform that we are using to advertise to them. So by benefiting our ad partner, i.e. Facebook, we are in turn benefiting ourselves. So I want to talk a little bit more about community building then, and about the importance of this loyal, engaged following, some tips around management, and ultimately how this is going to be an act of future proofing. So first rule of building a community is going to be to, I've realised I've skipped on, this is going well, thank you. It's listen, professional, sorry about that, guys. Just forget that bit happened. It's going to be to listen. Now, there's two sides to this, but the first thing to think about is understanding your audience. Now, whether you've got a community to begin with, or if you're looking to build a following, obviously everything we've been talking about today, it's we're leading up to this moment, but it's never going to be too late to start thinking about your community. It's really important to understand what it is that your audience wants to see ultimately, and what it is that they want to engage with. Now, this could be really taking time to look at interactions on your own posts, to be asking your audience, perhaps be using surveys, or it could be understanding based on interaction of your market competitors. Now, secondly, start thinking about social listening. There's a host of tools available to you in this day and age, likes of Hootsuite, Iconosquare, and countless others that give you insights into trends, interests, conversations, keywords that are resonating with your audience and your target audiences, most importantly. There's so much data available, from anecdotally in comments to empirical within social listening tools, that there's really no reason to be second guessing the sort of thing that your audience cares about. Now, from the perspective on the tools and on a budget, we're really fortunate to have thriving communities with our private closed groups. Now, on the tools, we've got different trades, and with on a budget, we've got a variety of budget-led things around home and family life. Now, these offer different things, of course, based on the interest, but they can help feed back into our content based on what is trending and what's being discussed. Now, we often use questions and conversations and polls within these to help guide the creation of content on our own channels, because ultimately they are our core audience, and private groups are a fantastic way to be engaging directly with your audience. So going on, which some of you got a sneak preview of, the second rule is to engage. Now, this is a really basic principle, and it's something that becomes increasingly difficult as a community grows, obviously, but actually is still incredibly important early on. And in many ways, it is even more important as you get bigger. Now, I'll talk about this example. So we know with on a budget that image-led meme posts often get some really good engagement. In fact, it's probably what you see most often. Again, I'm so sorry, Jamie. It's probably what you see most of all on your Facebook pages. Family members, friends tagging in each other into stuff like this. But, you know, we know that our audience is very family driven, so decided to go for this tell us you're a parent without telling us you're a parent. The tell us without telling us is a trend that really kind of kicked off on TikTok. Anyway, we got some fantastic responses back. I'll just kind of flick through, I'm sure you can read, but I made a sandwich for a hungry person. That person did not want the sandwich. I removed the sandwich, and now that person is crying because they don't have a sandwich. So that was one. And then the best one I spotted was at the bottom there. So I just bribed someone to do a poo on the toilet with the promise of a toy dinosaur, which is you know, a promise I think we can all hope for. And we took the time to kind of go through and respond to these comments, and you know, chose that one there at the bottom as the best answer. Now, it's stuff like that, and within that, you know, there was interaction with the audience members and getting kind of likes and reactions back from that, and it does just help to start build a little bit of community. Just think about this personally. You know, if you ever comment on creators' videos on Facebook or perhaps on YouTube as well, and you get a response back or reply or reaction, does that make you feel differently about that creator? You know, how does that change your perception of that engagement? Is it more likely to make you engage with that page or that person again? It's all about building that loyal tribe, and that are going to want to seek out and engage with your content and keep coming back. So moving on to the last point, it is to create. So taking the insights that we've taken from listening to the audiences and engaging with them, creating that conversation, you should be set to be able to create content that is really going to start giving back to your audience. Now, the best example I can think of for this is Talking Trades. So this was set up, funnily enough, a year ago today, as the pandemic started to unfold, and we could see in our comments on Facebook on the tools, really intense discussion amongst trades. Now, this was at a point when most people were forced, obviously, to stop work and stay at home, but tradespeople pretty much had to carry on throughout with no real choice to stop. Now, there was a lot of debate about safety and around the ethics of this. So we decided, why not replicate that conversation in a live show, give the audience a place to actually engage and share that debate. So this weekly talk show was born out of that. The host often sat in his van. Andy sat in his van, you know, delivering. We've got some software which you can able to pull people from around the country and beyond into the live, just much like a Zoom or as we're on now, or any other form of video call that everybody's had to get familiar with over the last year. And it just created that conversation that tradespeople were already having on a daily basis. So it evolved into a range of relevant topics as well, to the audience, covering all sorts of different debates within the industry. Now, one of my favorite regular slots that is on this is a tax advice slot that we've got. Now, at appropriate points in the financial year, we have on a lady called Jaquetta from HMRC, who she just comes on and just provides some really helpful information around grants and around tax advice and just money issues, really, for anybody, particularly in you know, kind of a pandemic economy, but also beyond that. And we always get some really fantastic engagement. You know, it's never necessarily the most viral of pieces of content, but actually it's providing something of real value. And, you know, to see the response coming back to that, and the fact that as soon as we go live with another one, we have loads of members tagging in their friends because they've seen it before. So again, you're creating that repeat content. You're creating something that people are familiar with and they want to engage with, because ultimately it's providing something helpful to them. You know, if Pete is sat on his lunch break having his sandwiches and he sees this live pop up that actually might help provide him with a little bit of information to, you know, quash some of his worries for that week about money or taxation, then, you know, that's a fantastic thing. So moving on to the final bit of this, obviously the whole point of this webinar today is future proofing. So ultimately, taking this time to understand and engage with the audience, we've built loyalty essentially. Now, not only does this help the performance of the content we're creating primarily, but also, as you'll likely be aware, with Facebook, as with all platforms, often at the total whim of algorithms. Now, these change all the time, and often without the platforms really understanding the algorithms themselves, which actually can be quite alarming, but there you go. Every publisher is vulnerable to this, and there is really no way around it. But by having that loyal audience, it can help to weather this storm. So your audience is going to seek out that content, and as we talk in trade, they're going to start coming back to it. So of course, you're always going to be vulnerable in some respects to algorithms, but if you've built that loyalty, you know, you are going to have a community in the truest sense of the word that is going to start coming back and help maintain your performance in the face of these changes to distribution. And really the takeaway from this whole webinar is about opportunities, if we're being totally blunt. Pardon me, we aren't just creating community solely for the benefit of the community at the end of the day, but creating this loyalty within the community has the benefits of improving the paid targeting within Facebook. If the majority of our ad spend is in Facebook, then we want the audience to be and the customers to be on Facebook ultimately. But also, the more loyal and engaged the audience is, the better we are going to be able to create opportunities to create these moments for first-party data, which in essence is going to become more vital than ever after post iOS 14, which can I just make one note on the title of the webinar of being the end is iOS 14. Whoever made that pun, we're going to have serious words after this. But there you go. Thank you very much, everybody. Please do put some questions for me if you want anything spoken about on community in the Q&A box. But I'm sure, as if any of you have got any sense, you'll be asking dear Troy some stuff about paid. He's shaking his head.
Oh, George, firstly, thank you for that. Super useful.
Okay.
I do have a question. I do have a question for you actually, though, just on something that crops up halfway through. If I think we're in a fortunate position, Electric House, we have a team of people to grow the communities. You yourself heading one of those up. We've got design teams, we've got production teams, so we can fuel it with content. If you have a lack of resource or a lack of time, where would you start? Where would you put your focus to start building a community? Where would you concentrate your time if it was limited?
I think that's where the engagement point of view really comes into play. Like, obviously, you know, it is easy for us to sit here with an organization that has got teams and departments to do all of this stuff. It's easy for us to say this. Now, it doesn't take a lot to be able to repurpose content. And for instance, using other platforms as well, like Twitter, whatever else, other platforms can all be a great source of content ideas, and even just creating text posts to begin with. You know, you don't need fancy design departments to begin with. Create that conversation where you can, and when you do get comments, even if you're starting off with one or two, engage. You know, start having that conversation as you would, and I think, you know, that is what's going to really start to build it. So it's almost going one step ahead than the listening element, and just starting to engage as early as you can, really. And just whatever you're interested in, you know, start to see. You've got to kind of fail to succeed with this. You know, see what isn't working on the platform, and then see what is. And when it is working, really double down on it and engage with it, I think, is the part. And hopefully in time or opportunities grow, you know, you'll be able to have access to assets and image content, videos, whatever it is. But you know, that building that community to begin with will really put you in good stead. So hopefully that is some help.
It does. No, I appreciate that answer, Georgian. Troy, similar question. If somebody, again, with limited time and resource and potentially limited knowledge, what do they do, knowing that we've kind of said, oof, this is your last week and next week you need to get your ducks in a row? What's the first thing that somebody should do, or the only thing they should do, if they could, that is going to give them the biggest opportunity with iOS 14, or is going to minimize the impact? What do they do today?
I think if they're running ads anyway, you know, the first things they should do is actually look into those 3 steps that Facebook outlined. You know, they're the key ones. So the domain verification, and prioritize those events, because firstly, those are the things that are going to impact you immediately. You know, they're the things that could stop your ads essentially from running. So if you're running ads, you know, and this isn't a sort of super time consuming thing. Go into Business Manager, follow the steps. As long as you've got access, or somebody that you're working with has access to you know, the sort of site's back end. And I know if you're using sites like, you know, some people who have their own businesses might be using sites like Shopify or Wix or you know, something like that. There are tools within those platforms that talk directly to Facebook and can set you up, you know, that domain verification from the app or from the platform. They can verify the domain, add the pixel, you know, get your events created. So it's a fairly painless process. You've just literally, you've got to follow the steps. Follow the steps. You'll have it done within an hour, you know, or even less, like 15 minutes. Like if you're really fast. I type with 2 fingers, so like I'm like that. I'm like the cat meme.
Brilliant. No, that's yeah, thank you for that, Troy. Yeah, sorry, I can't see, I don't know if we've had any Q&As or any questions come through. I can't see the pop-up, but look, our details, I think I said this, I think, Jamie, if you flick over to the next screen, if you could for me, mate. My contact details are on there. If anybody does have questions on whether it's what George was talking around the community, you know, what advice would we give you? If it's around directly iOS 14 or any of the minutiae that Troy has picked up, please feel free to reach out to us. You can get us on all of our handles and on socials as well. The guys are on LinkedIn. I'm sure they won't mind accepting you and getting their numbers up, getting past that 500 mark on LinkedIn, George, I think would be a good step. But seriously, please reach out to us. Hopefully this has been of use to you guys. I know that I think our plan after this, I'm going to wait for the thumbs up from Jamie, is we're going to be creating, you better get access to the webinar, but we're also going to be creating a bit of a paper on this, just to give a bit more detail, a bit more easily accessible, instead of going back and viewing the whole webinar. So that's something that we'll be able to distribute out to everybody that's attended today. Yeah, and I guess also for me, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you guys on. Hopefully you've picked up some interesting points. If you think there's anything we missed, any feedback on the webinars, that would be really appreciated. Yeah, and good luck with iOS 14. And if you're lucky enough to work from home today and the sun is shining like it is here, get outside, put your home office on, maybe go to the pub. That's my last little takeaway for you. Thank you very much for attending. That is us.
Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yeah, let's go to the pub.
Perfect.